Hello, this is Lori Michelle from Running on Love, and this is Running on Love with God, the weekly program. Today's subject matter is mental illness, and I'm here with my co-host, Anna Marie in Chicago. Hi, Anna Marie. And I'm here in Israel, and we're here to talk about how important it is to understand what the true source of mental illness actually is, and is medication the right way to treat it? Or is that only part of what we need to do to understand and treat mental illness? First, before you treat any illness, you need to know where it comes from. And I've had detailed conversations with our Creator, God Himself. I speak to Him fluently daily in the English language. I was awakened in 2009, and I'm teaching now the wisdom and educating people on the ways of Hashem God. And the other day, preparing for this very program today, I asked Him, I don't want to give out bad information, Hashem. Is there really any such thing as mental illness? And just then, He flashed an image in my mind's eye of a black masked man, a terrorist. And I knew exactly what He was saying. What He was saying was, it's Yetzer Hara. Yetzer Hara, if you don't know what it is the evil inclination. For some, they call that Satan. It's evil. And evil in this world is a tester. It's truly not a guy with a pitchfork who makes you do bad things. It's truly an alternate choice from goodness or God. And it's here designed to give us free will. So when He showed me the masked terrorist, I knew exactly what He was talking about. And in order to understand mental illness and where it comes from, you need to understand how we were created, what we truly are, and how we journey here in this world. And that information has been supplied to us thousands of years ago. There are very wise people in this world who know and understand how we were created and how to live a prescribed, beautiful life here on earth and prevent ourselves from suffering the way people in increasing numbers are suffering now from all forms of mental illness. So with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to you, Anna Marie, and ask me many questions, and I'll give you examples, and hopefully we can shed light.
You brought up a lot of interesting things just in your introduction. One thing that you touched on is you said, what is the source of mental illness? You gave an example of it with the terrorist, but can you talk a little bit more about what the source is?
Yes. When we were created, and it is said in the Torah, in the Bible, that Hashem God breathed into Adam's nostrils and gave him a soul, which means his soul was created from the eminence of Hashem. Our souls are created from Hashem. But there is really two of us in essence. We are a physical being that is also from Hashem, and He created everything that is in this world by speaking it into being. And He said, and there will be light, and there was light, and there will be darkness, and there was darkness, and He created everything that there is. And everything physical, our bodies and animals and plants, everything comes from Hashem. But our soul, who we truly are, is a creation and a portion, if you will, of the most magnificent being in all of creation, God Himself. So there's really two entities walking around. There's Lori, and Lori has a physical brain, and I have a prop today. I like to say the gefilte fish between your ears. This is gefilte fish. This is a Jewish appetizer, if you will, and it looks like brains. You'll never eat it again or try it if you've ever eaten it, because I now I now ruined it for everybody. It's actually very tasty with horseradish, but it's like your brain is gefilte fish between your ears, and it's a power center, if you will. And your body contains who you truly are. Your soul, your neshama, where you really come from, the realness that is truly you is a soul. So you have two entities here. You have the physical Lori, the physical Anna Marie, and you have the spirit that's housed inside here with gefilte fish between your ears. And this is a power center. So when you get depressed, what does that really mean? It means your soul is crying out, something's wrong, something's out of whack, something's out of balance. And what happens? Doctor, I'm depressed. I can't get out of bed. Something's wrong. So what does the doctor do? The secular doctor, who has no education in the neshama, in Torah, or any of that, says, oh, I know what's wrong. Your chemistry's out of whack. Let me give you something to bring you up. And if you're anxious, they give you something to bring you down. Hashem gave me the analogy that I could never have invented on my own. Over the weekend, while I was preparing for this program, I said, I need to explain that there's virtually two of us walking around, but it's really one. It's our soul, and then the animal part of us, which is our body, which houses who we really are. And we do this little dance with our body throughout life. We get hungry, we have to feed our body. It's really, in essence, two of us. So when you run to the doctor and you're exhibiting problems, the doctor's treating the physical side of you. And the analogy Hashem gave me was, if your lights go out in your home, you go over to the circuit breaker and you start flipping the switches. But if the problem isn't in the circuitry, but it's somewhere else, you're wasting your time. Or you could make matters worse, perhaps. If you start messing with the wires, you could mess up the wiring in your entire home if the problem is at the power center and you didn't even know. The power center being your soul. So the whole industry of mental health and mental health professionals, many of them don't even know or understand anything about the soul and what we are truly, and the body and how we connect to the body. All of that information in the mental health world is really void. It doesn't exist there. And there might be people in a rage right now because maybe there are Torah observant people in the mental health field saying, I know about Yetzer Hara. But the truth is, most of the world doesn't. And in America, most of the medical industry and professionals in the mental health field rarely even bring up the mere mention of God.
But the drugs work. The drugs help people feel better. They help them cope. So what's the harm in using the drugs if you're not aware of the connection to the soul?
Everything that comes into being with God's say-so. And even the existence of these drugs have come into being with his approval, and he's allowed them to come into being. But Hashem allows things to come into being that are not necessarily good for us. Drugs, in and of themselves, may not be harmful. The overprescribing of drugs can be very harmful. What's even more harmful is to diagnose daily people with incurable mental disease. That's a complete lie. Telling people, I'm sorry, but you have an eating disorder and the prognosis is very poor and you're likely to suffer from this disease for the rest of your life. And it is our recommendation that you take these drugs for the rest of your life. That's fallacious. That's a pure lie. I'm not saying the use of drugs is not helpful. I had major surgery. I had anesthesia. I would never go under the knife and have surgery without medicine. I've had infections. I take antibiotics. The existence of medications and the proper use of them is good. But over-medicating is not. And here's where the medical health field becomes egregiously evil. The pharmaceutical companies that manufacture these drugs, they have a vested interest in having you diagnosed with something that has no known cure and put you on these medications, some of which cost over $1,000 a month. $1,000 a month. So they have a vested interest for you to have an incurable mental illness with no known cure. The medical hospitals, the mental health hospitals, if you are unfortunate enough to find yourself in one of them, or fortunate, maybe you need care, if you have no insurance, they'll kick you out promptly. If you have insurance, they will milk the situation for weeks, if not months, and collect on your mental illness. It's a business. There is greed and there's avarice involved in the mental health world. And if people want to get up in arms and deny and get angry at what I'm saying, get angry. I really don't care what people think of me. I need to tell the truth, because the truth will help people wake up and reach, because there are answers in this world. There are people who have, Anna Marie, been diagnosed with things like bipolar and told there was no cure, and they are walking around years later completely drug-free and completely normal. And I know of them. So it's untrue. And I'm not telling people, and I'm not being reckless in telling people that if they're on these medications to come off of them like that. Because these drugs are very powerful, Anna Marie, and if anybody wants to come off of them, the worst thing they can do is to stop them without a doctor's care, because they play with your brain chemistry, and you can cause yourself to spin out of control and cause yourself even more harm than good. So that's not the answer.
So, but you're saying that it is possible to get off the drugs with a physician's help, but the physicians in general don't understand the whole soul-body connection. So how can a physician help you get off the drugs?
Not every physician will be on board. Not every physician will listen to what I'm saying and agree. You need to find the right physician, the right therapist, and you need to reach for God. Lest we forget, this program is called Running on Love with God. He's real. He's not fictional. He's not the work of fiction. And the Torah was not written by mankind. It was written and delivered to us through God, through God's prophet, Moses, and it is his Torah. And within Torah, not just the written 5 books, but there's oral Torah and halacha, meaning Torah law, that has been given to the Jewish children and handed down for generations, that is a protection. And when I say that the source of mental illness, is spiritual, I mean it. It is spiritual. It is your spirit not navigating the journey in the vessel, in the physical world, in the proper prescribed way. We have been given a prescription on how to live a blessed and healthy life here on earth. And most of the world is completely oblivious and unaware of this.
In your YouTube introduction, you talked about children and drugs, and specifically you said, many schools are ordering parents to seek medical attention for their unruly children. Some schools have even required that children be placed on psychological medications or be expelled. And then you asked, how did this happen?
Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
I've met parents, one specific parent, I don't mention names because I protect the privacy of people. I met a parent who this happened to, and she had to pull her child out of school and send her child to private school. It is a very common diagnosis now to diagnose children with attention deficit disorder. They're unruly, they don't sit still, they have a learning disability. And the learning professionals, the teachers, are very quick to advise you to get an occupational therapist. Your child isn't doing something up to par, and you need this, and you need that, and you need medical intervention. And you can cause a child severe psychological damage by telling a child from a very young age that there's something wrong with them. Years ago, when a child couldn't sit still, they learned how to cope. There was discipline involved. There's not much of that going on now. Now, if you discipline a child, you might be called be under attack by the parents, or the parents might be under attack by the educators calling DIFUS. What does that stand for? It stands for something. Something about it's people calling the authorities against parents, saying that they're unfit to be parents. There's all kinds of craziness going on in the world. Everything's politically incorrect now in this world. And now it's politically correct for a lot of children to be on medications. So how did it happen? It happened over the years when it became completely inappropriate and improper to mention God, and we moved to become a more secular society that doesn't recognize our Creator, God, as a power that's above all of us. There's a lot of fear of invoking the name of God. Why? Because we have freedom of religion, and okay, Emma, you're Christian and I'm Jewish, so which God are you talking about? The God of the Christians or the God of the Jews? Well, it's really the same God, but don't you infringe on my Jewishness. And you might say, well, don't you infringe on my Christianity. So as a result, political correctness, no God. We're not allowed to mention God. And when you have a mental health problem and you go to seek a doctor's attention, God is not mentioned. It's completely inappropriate. But God, Hashem, is really your only salvation to mental health. Because the problem exists in your soul, and your soul comes from Him. We are a creation of His. So if you don't recognize that from Good Morning, that there is a power greater than you, and He is real, and you don't wake up in the morning and acknowledge the realness of God, it's downhill all day long. And by nighttime, if you haven't taken 2 or 3 different medications, you're going to need something to go to sleep.
Okay, let's say that someone is feeling a little depression or some anxiety. They're not yet taking medication. What steps can they take to feel better without going to the bottle of pills?
The bottle of pills might be necessary. Are you surprised I said that?
Yeah, I am.
Okay. I'm not against medication. If you are so depressed that you can't get out of bed and you can't even shower, and you are completely dysfunctional, medication may be appropriate to bring you to a place where someone can communicate with you and reason with you. And once you're in that place where you're not so down or you're not so high and you're somewhere where someone can reason with you, then it's time to reach for God. And I'm going to keep banging that point home that He is real. He's not fiction. And if you are hearing voices is not a death sentence that you are mentally ill and incurable and need to be medicated to remove those voices from your life. You want to ask me about that?
Well, I think you would know.
Okay.
Because you have heard voices. You do you hear Hashem.
The minute you say that I'm hearing voices, the alarm bells go off. And maybe they should, because the black masked terrorist is probably hearing voices of his own, and he's probably saying that it's God telling him to kill all the infidels, right? But you cannot remove all the voices. The drugs that play these chemical games with your brain, and you're messing with the gefilte fish and the switchboard, trying to push these voices away and make everybody centered and even, and you don't hear voices, it's not a human possibility. You at least have your own voice, right? That's one voice. And I'm here to tell the world there are voices around us. And some people have the ability to hear voices that are not physically in the room, and I am one of them. The problem comes into play that it's invisible and you don't know what you're listening to. And some of these voices are coming from Yetzer Hara, which is where I started this program. The evil inclination literally has a voice. A voice. Hashem, God, has a voice. And there are other voices. There are people who have crossed over to another dimension behind what the New Age people will call the veil. There's a separation between us, the living, and those who are no longer living. But some of us can hear them speaking. I can hear them. Where we have to go is become educated. You don't listen to these voices, and you don't accept every single voice that you hear as the voice of God or goodness. It's very dangerous, but it can't be drugged out of you. So when you have a diagnosis like bipolar with delusions, and you have diagnoses like schizophrenia, you can control some of it and intervene with their chemistry in their brain. But it's virtually impossible to remove all the voices for good out of their consciousness. And now, okay, so there's going to be a lot of people who suffer from these illnesses, and they're on the perfect cocktail, and they're not hearing any voices anymore. And so you're a liar, Lori Michelle, and no, I'm not. What I'm saying to you, Anna Marie, is whether you recognize that you're being spoken to or not by God and your spirit guides who are surrounding you in love, you are. And your voices that you're hearing may not be in English, and you may not hear them as an audible, Anna Marie, someone's at the door. You don't hear it that way. You hear it like, gee, I think I'll get up and see if someone's at the door. That's how most people hear the spirit world. Gee, I think I'll go to the supermarket. I don't know why. I just have this impulse. I have to go to the supermarket right now. And when you go, you see a friend you haven't seen in 30 years standing at the door. But you didn't hear it in language. I hear it in language. I hear Hashem say to me, today you need to go to the bank. Why? Because there may be a problem with your account. You should check it. Okay. There's no downside. It sounds like it's an okay idea. And I heard it in English. But you may not hear it in language, Anne-Marie. You may hear, I have to go to the bank. I don't know why, but I think I need to check my account for some reason. It's silent. But when people have an awakening, they begin to hear audible voices, and they're not all good. They're not all God. And there are people who are clairvoyant and believe that they speak to the archangels and the angels and God, and they're getting messages from beyond. And it's very dicey if they don't know legitimately where and who those voices are. It's a very dangerous game that they're playing. So you might say to me, well, Lori, well, you're playing that game. And I will tell you, Anne-Marie, this is not a game to me. This is not a game at all. When I began to hear the voice of our Creator, the first thing I did was run to my rabbi and reach for the Torah. If you are not learned in the ways of God and His laws, you're playing with fire. If you're playing with Ouija boards and tarot cards and reading palms, you are playing with evil. There is a whole invisible web around every human being in this world. And whether you hear these voices in audible fashion, spiritually, with your spiritual ears, or whether you're just receiving an inclination, you're being influenced by the invisible world. And you need to be educated. And that's where I started today. The source of mental illness, as we know it, is Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination. And it's written about in the Torah, and you can learn about it. And we need to learn these things in order to heal ourselves so we can heal our world.
When I asked you what is the prescription for good mental health, you said reach for God. Can you give us some practical steps for how to do that? How do you reach for God?
The first step that I did when this all happened to me, and I was a secular Jew, was to go to my rabbi. Go to your clergy. Maybe that's the first step. We have 90 seconds left. I reach for the Torah. The Torah has secrets in it that are not secrets. There are very learned people who understand and know the dangers of the spiritual world when it combines with the physical world. And there are tools and ways from morning till night to insulate yourself and protect yourself. So I would like to guide you to go to websites like Chabad.org, CHABAD.org. That's one website where you can go and learn Torah and Google and research from these Jewish websites information on how to learn about the soul, the Yetzer Hara, and how to insulate yourself from these problems. That's the first step. Thank you for joining us today. This is a very deep conversation, and it needs to be spoken about in a deeper way, and I hope you will engage me and go to my new website, LoriMichelle.net. You can schedule a private meeting with me, and all the proceeds go to the charity of World Peace, Running on Love, Because if we listen and learn and work for peace and work on ourselves, we can achieve peace in our world, in our time. God bless you. I wish you peace on earth. God bless you.